Okay, live stream is up. PC recording done.
Cloud is rolling.
Backup is rolling.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's remote New York City Council hearing of the Committee on Contracts Fiscal 2023 Preliminary Budget Hearing. At this time, would all panelists please turn on your videos. To minimize disruption, please place electronic devices to vibrate or silent. If you wish to submit testimony, you may do so at testimony@council.nyc.gov. Again, that's testimony@council.nyc.gov. Chair Wong, we are ready to begin.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Committee on Contracts Fiscal 2023 Preliminary Budget Hearing. My name is Julie Won, and I am the chair of the committee. I would like to introduce my colleagues who are present at this hearing, including Council Members Lee, as well as Council Member Nurse. Today, we will hear the testimony of from Lisa Flores, the city's Chief Procurement Officer, and the Director of Mayor's Office of Contract Services, also known as MOCS. MOCS fiscal 2023 budget totals $37.9 million, including $18 million in personal services, funding to support 194 full-time positions. The majority of its other than personnel services, OTPS, budget is allocated to Passport, which stands for Procurement and Sourcing Solutions Portal. If you were here last time, we had an in-depth hearing on it, which has seen a significant increase in funding since the adoption of the fiscal 2022 budget. The preliminary budget includes a vacancy reduction plan that would reduce MOCS's budget headcount by 25 full-time positions. At today's hearing, we will examine the details of MOCS's budget and the impact the changes in the budget will have on operations. In addition to the budget, we would like to discuss MOCS's oversight role in city procurement, as well as review findings in the 2021 Procurement Indicators Report. The city's fiscal 2023 proposed budget includes over $19 billion for contractual services. With such a substantial investment at stake, we must vigorously ensure that the city's procurement policies are both prudent and equitable. We should also consider how to use the city's procurement as a means to reinvest in our communities. We look forward to working with you and your office in finding ways to improve the city's procurement process, specifically improving the cycle time of contract review and registration, expanding opportunity for minority and women-owned business enterprises, and making it easier for our nonprofit providers to do business with the city. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the Contracts Committee staff for their hard work preparing for this hearing, Finance Unit Head John Russell, Committee Counsel Alex Polinoff, and Policy Analyst Leah Skripiak. I'll now turn it over to our moderator, Alex Polinoff, to go over some procedural items. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Wan. My name is Alex Polinoff, and I'm counsel to the New York City Council's Committee on Contracts. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that you will be on mute until you're recognized to speak, at which point you will be unmuted by the Zoom host. If you mute yourself after you've been unmuted, you will need to be unmuted again by the host. Please be aware that there could be a delay in muting and unmuting, so please be patient with us. The first panelist to give testimony today will be the Director of the Mayor's Office of Contract Services, Lisa Flores. MOCS's First Deputy Director, Ryan Murray, Chief Administrative Officer Jeremy Hallbridge, and Chief Technology Officer Brandon Chiazza from MOCS will all be available for questioning as well. I'll call on each of you shortly when it's time to begin your testimony. During the hearing, if council members would like to ask a question of the administration or of a specific panelist, please use the Zoom raise hand function and I will call on you in order. We will be limiting council member questions to 5 minutes, which includes the time it takes to answer those questions. Before we begin testimony today, I will administer the oath. To all members of the administration who will be offering testimony or will be available for questions, please raise your right hands now. I will call on you each individually for a response. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions? Director Flores.
I do.
First Deputy Director Murray.
Will.
Chief Administrative Officer Hallbridge,
I do.
Chief Technology Officer Chiazza.
I do.
Thank you. Director Flores, you may begin when ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Wan and members of the Contracts Committee. My name is Lisa Flores, and it's great to see you all again. For those of you who have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, I encourage you to reach out to me and my team after the hearing so I can learn more about your priorities in leading procurement reform. As you know, MOX is a small agency in terms of budget with a wide responsibility to oversee the city's annual contracting portfolio. MOX is charged with both providing traditional oversight on the city's procurement process and helping to facilitate that process. Fiscal year 2021 saw the city's overall procurement portfolio increase by over a third, going from $22.5 billion in FY20 to over $30 billion in FY21, which demonstrates a critical importance of procurement to government operations. This growth was driven in part by a major increase in human services contracting. This industry saw about a $3.5 billion increase in contracting, going from $8.5 billion to $12 billion between FY20 and FY21. Meanwhile, goods purchasing substantially decreased as a share of citywide purchasing, as it accounted for 24% of total contract value in FY20 and fell to 10% in FY21. Overall, mayoral agencies entered into about $8 billion in emergency COVID-19 contracts under Emergency Executive Order 101, which lasted between March 2020 and July 2021, and over $500 million in contracts under Emergency Executive Order 322, which started in December of 2021 and has been renewed to remain in effect. With regard to the overall procurement landscape, total MWBE contract value in FY21 was $1.17 billion, which amounts to just 4% of total contracting value, despite being the city's second highest utilization rate under Local Law 1. We're strongly committed to increasing utilization of MWBEs and will continue to keep this committee apprised of our progress. As you've heard from us at the most recent Contracts Committee hearing, a central part of improving procurement continues to be the implementation of Passport to bring the city's procurement process into a fully digital environment. Passport provides a single shared platform for agencies and vendors to complete contracting activity, including vendors filing necessary paperwork, agencies releasing solicitations, and both parties moving the contract towards registration with the controller. We've seen the adoption curve grow as we expected, with over 30,000 vendors engaged in the system and thousands of contracts registered, and we have devised a roadmap for the next set of enhancements that was shared with your office in advance of the previous hearing. Passport is a tool that enables contracting, but it is guided by the rules, laws, regulations, and processes that have built up over the course of decades to shape New York City procurement. Our next phase of reforms will concentrate on taking a hard look at these rules to reduce administrative burdens, simplify the process, and generally bring procurement up to speed with a modern digital environment. This work will focus on 4 key areas: cutting red tape and rules, finding efficiencies to speed registration, increasing transparency and accountability, and minimizing cost and risk. Across all of these key initiatives, we will place an emphasis on improving equity and reducing disparities, with special attention to critical portfolios such as technology and capital. Stakeholder partnerships and on-the-ground community insight will be critical to achieving these objectives. We're currently in the process of meeting MWBEs, community groups, to get their insight on how we can make the procurement process simpler and improve the city's MWBE utilization, even beyond the parameters set by Local Law 1. Likewise, we've already made progress in the human services sector through our collaboration with the Comptroller's Office and the Joint Task Force on Not-for-Profits, which has led to a series of tangible reforms to bring efficiency to human service contracting and maintain an ongoing dialogue. We're also partnering with the Office of Risk Management and Compliance to find ways to better align the city's risk review process to the highest risk portfolios, while potentially easing the burden on lower risk categories. We will need your partnership as well. I've appreciated the insight and attention this committee has shown thus far and look forward to your feedback as we carry out these initiatives. MOX's team are prepared to carry out this work, as we have consistently provided hands-on support to agencies utilizing the system, overseen compliance with procurement rules, and distilled guidance to agency procurement staff. Our teams also oversee technology design and implementation of Passport to ensure that the system meets the needs of the users and the city's complex procurement rules are appropriately built in. We have a strong cross-functional approach within MOX that enables constant communication so that system updates are informed by all key groups, user experience is prioritized, and any issues can be quickly resolved. This also creates an environment where team members with different perspectives and specializations can contribute to the reforms and initiatives I've outlined above. In terms of budget and headcount, MOX will work closely with OMB to ensure that we can deliver on our commitment to New Yorkers. We have a budgeted headcount of 194 in our agency with a budget of 18 million for personnel spending in FY23. Our OTPS budget in FY23 is 19.9 million, largely comprised of contracts in support of the Passport system, including our contract with Ivalua, worth 84 million in total over the course of 10 years. I provided details on this contract to your office after the prior hearing, but please let me know if there's any more information that you need. We're also supported by Accenture, who provides system integration and maintenance support for several of our technical systems, including Passport. This contract is worth 16.4 million over 3 years. And Accenture has been a valued partner in ensuring that we maximize the potential utility of our investment in Passport. Once again, I thank you for taking the time to convene this hearing and engaging on the important questions of how we can make contracting work better for everyone. I'm fully committed to working with each member in front of us today to devise solutions to continue improving the procurement process. And I welcome your feedback on the strategic initiatives we have shared so far. I am joined today by First Deputy Director Ryan Murray, Chief Administrative Officer Jeremy Halbridge, and Chief Technology Officer Brandon Chiazza. We're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Flores. I will now turn it over to the questions from Chair Wan. Panelists from the administration, please stay unmuted if possible during this question and answer period. And a reminder to Chair Wan that you will be in control of muting and unmuting yourself during this period. Chair Wan, begin when ready.
Thank you so much, Alex and Lisa. I just want to acknowledge my colleagues who have also joined, Councilmember Brewer as well as Councilmember Ariola. Thank you so much for joining. Lisa, thank you so much for your testimony. And as always, our favorite topic of discussion at our hearings is Passport. So thank you so much for giving us a high-level breakdown of Passport expenses. So the November plan included an additional 10.9 million in fiscal 2023 and 11.8 million in fiscal 23 for the Passport system. The budget seems to be continually adding funding to this project. And like you highlighted, it's about a total cost of 83 million. Can you give us so especially for the general audience, can you give us a breakdown, an itemized breakdown of just for one fiscal year for either fiscal year 2023 or the one that just passed, to your best of your abilities of what the costs are broken down to per year?
Thank you, Chair Wan. It's a pleasure to see you again, and I really appreciate you coming over to our office the other day to see Passport and to provide your valuable feedback, and we continue to look forward to having your input during the course of the next few weeks and months in our relationship in building transparency and efficiency for procurement. So I will start answering that question and then hand it over to Chief Administrative Officer Jeremy Halbridge or Brandon Chiazza, our CTO. But I will say just in general context that the funding for the scope as it's rolled out for Passport has been in terms of being efficient and ensuring that we have enough time and ability to design appropriately. We've been releasing functionality sort of by phases. So the fiscal year where there's a recent fiscal year is an increase as it relates to Passport is not necessarily reflecting an out of scope increase. It is where we've packaged a great deal of functionality that's going to be rolled out in the next phase. But I'd ask Chief Administrative Officer Jeremy Halbridge or our CTO Brandon Chiazza to give you some of the other details that you requested, Chair Wan.
Sure. Thank you, Director Flores, and thank you, Chair, for the question. Our FY22 allocated budget for the Evalua contract is about $10.5 million. The FY23 value is about $11.2 million. And that's a breakdown between the subscription costs and the contract costs related to the implementation of phase 3, which we've talked about in the prior hearing, the additional scope of work that was recently funded.
Are there any more details that you can give to the general public about what the contract costs are for implementation?
Sure. I guess one thing that we can say is for services and implementation across the full value of the contract, that 83 million that was discussed earlier, we are expecting that it's approximately $66.1 million for the implementation and services related to it. And then the subscription over the 10-year value, the 10-year term of the contract, is about $17.3 million.
And just to add on to that, I think, Chair Wan, for the public who may not know what Passport is or have heard of it, that the end-to-end system of digitizing the procurement system, which, as many may know, for many years was completely in paper and not standardized across all of the agencies, is a system that covers initially the scope was the mayoral agencies to provide both digitization of the filings that are required if you're doing business with the city of New York, which used to be called Vendex. And then phase 1 put all of that paperwork into a digitized system, reducing the processing times from what used to be weeks and maybe months to, close to a few days. And that was a major lift at the beginning of the project. And the majority of the meat and potatoes of the project, as per the original scope, was putting all of the procurement methods for the mayoral agencies, all of the steps of getting your funding approved, doing the solicitation out to potential bidders, receiving the solicitations, scoring them, the award phase, doing the appropriate approvals within this digital platform. Over time, with the interest of digitizing the sort of ecosystem related to procurement, we have now included invoicing, which is coming in full steam ahead. And we've also included a portion of the DOE's portfolio. But I hope that helps apply sort of real world what we're doing with the system and what we intend to achieve.
I want to acknowledge Councilmember Carr, who has joined. Thank you so much for joining. Jeremy, can you help me understand? So for subscription costs for 17.3 million, how many users do we have per year, so that I can understand 17.3 million divided by how many users per year, so that I understand the actual cost, justification for that?
From a user perspective, I'd have to pass that over to Brandon Chiazza, our Chief Technology Officer, but I can speak generally to the per year cost, right? So this is a SaaS product, and for the functionality that the city has paid for, right, the implementation and services and everything that Director Flores mentioned earlier, we have to pay under the terms of the contract a subscription cost, which includes ensuring that the system is up, available, and usable throughout the term of the contract. And I'll pass it over to Brandon in order to answer specifically about the users. But at a high level, that is the base in order to ensure the functionality is available to all city users.
Thanks. And yeah, just to add, Chair Wan, I don't have a specific number on the total users over each fiscal year, but we can follow up and get you that number. But I will say that the cost in terms of the subscription is really module based. It's access to the platform. It's not necessarily a user based subscription. But again, happy to get you the numbers by fiscal year.
Yeah, thank you. I think that would be helpful. And then, Jeremy, for the contract costs related to implementation, so are you saying that for each release, there's new implementations, which is why the cost continues to either remain the same or go up? Because it's already an existing out-of-the-box product. So I'm trying to understand what implementation costs there are.
Sure. So the implementation, thank you, Chair Wan, sorry. The implementation costs are by the scope, right? So there was the initial contract that went out and was let by Do It, and then eventually became a MOX contract. And within each release, we've put out new functionality, but within the $66 million that I'm talking about, that is about creating Passport and adding scope via the releases that were discussed in the functionality that Director Flores mentioned earlier, where you're asking about the subscription costs. The subscription costs have increased slightly over time from the initial contract, and that is, to your point, because of the additional complexity added into the contract. As more modules are added to the contract, functionality added to the overall system, the subscription costs have risen in line with that.
And if I may, Chair Wan, just to circle back to your earlier question, just to set sort of, stage of how many users are in Passport, as CTO Chaza mentioned, it's not a cost per person per se, but we do have over 30,000 vendors in the system with over 80,000 users at this point. And we anticipate that that will continue to increase as we, as a result of the non-for-profit task force recommendations, for example, that the controller is on board with becoming part of the system as well. So that will continue to grow.
Got it. Jeremy, for the general public, can you share for fiscal year 2023 what the new functionalities are that they can expect for the next release?
Thank you, Chair Wan. I actually think Brandon Chiazza, our CTO, would definitely be the better person to speak to that. I'm happy to chime in after if there are any specific other questions.
Yeah, so thanks, Chair Wan, for the question. So in terms of what we get for each release, Lisa Flores, Director Flores, had mentioned that we had release 1 was sort of Vendex replacement. Release 2 is our Amazon type purchasing. We have pre-existing contracts that are master agreements that we purchase off of. And those are mostly goods purchasing. So we did that in release 2. We included, for the first time around this process, a centralized place for vendors to invoice, as well as receive, as well as agencies to track and record their receiving of these orders, these goods products. And we do about $1.2 billion in goods purchasing every year. And then, like we mentioned, release 3 and 4 were the largest scope of releases. We had everything from our requisition through our award process, which includes putting a RFP out on the street, collecting digitally responses from vendors, and then going through the evaluation and award process, which includes oversight approvals, as well as contract negotiations. And then forthcoming, what we have to look ahead is in release 5 and beyond, are things that we've heard through our engagements with both agencies and vendors that include everything from vendor contract budget upgrades, which allows vendors to go directly to the system, manage the fee schedule or the milestones in the system, and have sort of a conversation around that with the agencies, as well as tracking subcontractor payments, which is something that's been a critical item for the past several years. And then we also have things like improving our capital budget management process through embedding that functionality into the system. So a lot of the capital management process is taking place within the capital agencies right now, within their own systems. We want to provide a way for those agencies to plug into our systems, create a little bit more of a centralized connection to our application, and allow for a little bit more seamlessness in the capital management process, as well as transparency and visibility. So those are just to name a few. In addition, we're upgrading the platform. I think we mentioned this in the previous hearing and when you guys came over to visit with us, but we're really looking forward to upgrading the platform too in the next year.
Got it. Thank you so much. Has the scope of phase 3 changed at all, which has increased costs, or has the scope changed the same? Were there any new additions to the scope to phase 3 of the project that has led to the increase of cost?
Thank you, Chair One. I'll take that to start and then pass it along as needed. So phase 3 is what we're calling release 5. It's basically everything that CTO Chiazza mentioned moments ago. There isn't an increase in cost because of phase 3. That is the cost that we've identified as reasonable and appropriate for that amount of work.
Got it. And then what cost controls do you have in place to prevent cost overruns?
Well, so I'll start, Chair Wan, and allow the CTO and Chief Administrative Officer to chime in. So I want to clarify, make sure it's clear that the system is a COTS system, but I think we can all acknowledge with the complexity and bureaucracy of city procurement, I don't think there would be any COTS system that would mirror exactly all the steps and processes that are the city's sort of Byzantine procurement process. And that's just speaking about the current rules and regulations, not necessarily accounting for there have been built up at over many years at each agency their own internal processes to achieve the steps required in the procurement rules. So it's not really an overrun. The scope had always included doing Vendex digitally, allowing for the procurement process of selection and award to happen in the system. It did not originally include DOE, did not originally include invoicing, for example. But when work is scoped out, there is a long design process, sort of a cross-functional process, not just with Chief Technology Officer Brandon Childs and his team, but the business process, procurement folks at the Mayor's Office contracts, and all of our stakeholders, agencies, and the like. So there's a lot of time spent on the design process to ensure that when the final work is scoped out for a particular phase or release, that it is closely aligned with what our needs are so that we're not in a situation of having cost overruns.
Got it. I just want to acknowledge Councilmember Jim Gennaro for joining. Thank you so much for joining. From what I understand, it sounds like the contractors on this project are Ivalua and Accenture. Are there any other contractors or vendors involved in this project?
So the contractor for the SaaS system is Ivalua, and as we mentioned earlier, Accenture was brought on later in the project phase and is a great partner with ensuring sort of our maintenance and our engagement with Ivalua, ensuring that all of our releases are properly scoped and designed, as I mentioned earlier. And then we have other ancillary work that happens to support the work of the office that touches upon Passport, because obviously everything we do here touches upon the city's system of record for procurement, but is not necessarily directly related to building or continuing to iterate upon the system. But Chief Administrative Officer Jeremy Halbridge or our CTO can add some more information.
Sure. Thank you, Director Flores, and thank you, Chair Wan, for the question. We have, as Director Flores said, a number of smaller contracts related to assisting MOX and Passport that are related to the rollout and adoption. You can imagine rolling out a system that affects thousands of workers, billions of dollars in contracts is a complex task. So we've added these vendors to assist us with their specialized skills to ensure the success of the project.
Who are those vendors?
Sure. So we have a number of them. We have a few in different areas. I'm happy to, after the hearing, give you the full list and details of those. But at a high level, we have a vendor for adoption support, vendor engagement. We have another vendor that also assists with business analysis, working through the details of the changes that we're making in the design process, and then quality assurance assistance as well to ensure as we roll through the testing, we make sure that everything is done. And then additionally, right, DocuSign is one of the ways that we have embedded within Passport to ensure the e-signature process works and makes this a seamless process.
Jeremy, how many smaller vendors are there in total?
There's 4 or 5. Happy to get you the full list after this hearing.
And then is there a reason why Accenture couldn't do the smaller tasks? Other than DocuSign? Or design process, quality assurance?
Sure. Accenture is set up, and thank you, Chair Wan, for the question. I'm going to partially answer to the best of my ability, and then I think Brandon Chiazza, our CTO, can answer as well. Accenture is set up and structured as a manner to ensure that we are embedding ourselves and ensuring that the contract is maintained throughout the full term of the Evalua contract. The other vendors are one-time needs that we've identified to enhance MOX's ability to ensure the success of the project. Brandon, if you want to add on as well.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, that's right. I mean, I don't want to add too much more. I think that captures it. It's a short-term need. They're focused in scope, such as like sprints to get materials developed, or as Jeremy mentioned, adoption to take place. We try as much as possible to manage in-house our institutional knowledge and keep that procurement knowledge in-house. So we have our operations team that is really engaging with agencies on a daily basis and offering both technical support as well as procurement operational support.
For the current contractors and your partners, are these yearly renewals or are they on a longer time frame?
Thank you, Chair Wan. As I mentioned earlier, these ancillary contracts that we talked about are for the current year assistance. We'll be doing reviews as necessary to see if we need to continue those, working with OMB and others to ensure we have what we need to be successful. Evalua and Accenture are longer term contracts. As Director Flores mentioned in her testimony, the Evalua contract is a 10-year term, which runs through FY26. And the Accenture contract is a 3-year term that ends, I believe, FY24. And again, just to reiterate, right, to what Chief Technology Officer Chiazza said, that these ancillary contracts are specific scope and focus on needs right now to help us, as he mentioned.
Yeah, and I would just add that what I think is unique about how the office set up both the initiation of this monumental task citywide of digitizing the procurement system, and then with the foresight of, again, just like the city's system of record for budget and accounting, FMS, Passport is and will continue to be, and our hope is continue to grow as a city, the city's system of record for procurement. They had the foresight of wanting to have as resources in-house to support this system on an ongoing basis, as opposed to relying on external contractual support. So that is something very, I think, unique of how the support was built around building it and maintaining it. So we, as I said, we have our own technology experts here that work in a cross-functional manner with our business process folks that are city staff. So some of the other very small contracts are sort of spurts or one-time needs and not ongoing contractual obligations.
Have there been any delays in deliverables for Passport within the last year?
I will ask CTO Chiazza to respond.
There you go. No, Chair One, no.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to move on to questions about vacancy reductions. As part of the mayor's program to eliminate the gap, the preliminary plan includes an elimination of 25 positions on mocks. What types of positions were eliminated, and how will this impact your office's plans moving forward?
Jeremy, I'd ask you to take that question, please.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Wan. So the mayor made a commitment to New Yorkers that this administration would take a close and hard look at how we deliver services to build a more efficient and cost-effective government. We worked with OMB and our agency partners to determine how we would hit the respective targets. It impacted our entire agency, right? As you mentioned, Chair Wan, 25 headcount is a large percentage of our budget. And so we had to dig deep and really manage how that was done. And so working with OMB, we were able to hit the target and are moving ahead with discussions with OMB throughout the rest of the budget process.
So which type of positions were eliminated in mocks?
Sure. Thank you. So at a high level, we took positions across all of our major divisions. There were technology positions that were reduced, service desk, procurement operations positions that were reduced, and then a number of our agency partners also had their headcount reduced as well.
And how has that changed your operational planning for the upcoming fiscal year?
Thank you for that question, Chair Wan. MOCS, as all city agencies, are continuing to work with OMB, and we'll continue to work over the next few months as budget's finalized, and determining what our needs are and ensuring that we continue to maximize the efficiencies in our current structure. So we are, as the city has done consistently, especially I think as evidenced during COVID, city staff are very dedicated and understand that we are here to serve, and everyone has been working full steam throughout the pandemic, and everyone's extremely dedicated to continuing to do our best to make sure that we meet the needs of New Yorkers. And as I said, we continue to be in dialogue with OMB, and will be over the next few months.
Okay. And then it's been highlighted to me that over the last several years, MOCS has operated with a high vacancy rate to begin with. What are some challenges for filling those vacancies, and how many vacancies does MOCS currently have, including the reduction that we just talked about?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Wan. I'll take that. So our current vacancy rate in FY22 is approximately 14%. What I can tell you is that MOCS is focused on ensuring that we build the right culture and environment to hire the right talent across the city to be a part of what the administration's goals are, and to work through and assist the citizens of New York. Over the last year, we've actually hired 52 staff. Unfortunately, over that same time, we've lost about 37 staff, and you can see that that's the pull and tug in the environment that we're in. It is a difficult environment to both hire and retain staff, and so we work with OMB, we work across networks throughout the city, trying to find diverse and talented staff to bring them in and join us in our mission.
Got it. Thank you. Then yesterday, during the Finance Committee hearing, I had asked the Director of OMB on the cycle time of procurement and contracts. So I have the same question for MOCS. Outside of Passport, do you have any recommendations for streamlining the procurement process in order to reduce cycle time? And what are the biggest challenges to reducing contracting cycle time? Because I know that our friends here who are here to testify are very curious about this question.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Chair Wan. And, as a as a point of clarification, the quote unquote cycle time as reported and has been reported traditionally every year is based on one procurement method, competitive sealed bid. And that method obviously has different steps than some of the other procurement methods. So really what's exciting about, I think, the future and about our commitment and our collaboration with our partners, including the Comptroller's Office, which is really an unprecedented collaboration, is how do we look at data and see where there are appropriate timeframes that will achieve the end goal of being timely, meaning getting your contract registered on time according to the contract start date, so that vendors, not-for-profit partners, MWBEs can get paid on time. And so it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all. There are multiple steps in the process. The planning phase is a good example of, it's in some cases the amount of time from when an agency decides they want to procure goods or services to when they complete their oversight approvals and get a solicitation out in the street may be a very long time frame. But what's important is it an appropriate time frame for what the agency is trying to procure? And an example I think is resonates well is, if you are a human service agency and you are launching a brand new program that is going to have an impact on the community, it might be appropriate there for you to have a longer timeline that you work towards to allow for engagement with the community and input that will be part of the solicitation that goes out onto the street so that you have a better program. So we are looking forward to, in the next few months, working with the controller and other stakeholders and digging into that data and creating additional KPIs, which, as you know, is one of the major recommendations in the task force report. And also, we're also looking forward to the opportunity of, through the PBB, through our partners across the city, with stakeholders across all of the industries, taking the time to roll up our sleeves and start breaking down the PBB rules, where we need to change rules, eliminate rules, or create new ones that actually reflect what it's like to do business in this current time frame in a digital space. Whereas the rules and regulations, the administrative code, the charter, the PBB rules are all based on a period in time where everything was in paper and nothing was possible to be digitized. So I think we have to now take this opportunity where we have a system in place to do the hard work of having our rules and regulations and cutting down the bureaucracy by which that tool is built upon. And we really look forward to the initial conversations we've had thus far, of hearing your input and everyone else on the committee and other council members, and hearing what you understand are the pressure points from your constituents and how we can build that into our reform process.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Alex, I'll turn it back to you for the council members to ask questions.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair mentioned, we'll now move to council member questions. Council members who are present, if you have questions for the administration, please use the Zoom raise hand function and you will be added to the question queue. Council members, please keep your questions to 5 minutes, including the answers to those questions. Please let the sergeant at arms tell you when your time begins, and then the sergeant will let you know when your time is up. So any council members who are currently present, if you have questions, please feel free to use the Zoom raise hand function now. It seems that there are no council members who are raising their hands at the moment, so I will turn it back to the chair. Chair Juan, if you have any additional questions, feel free to ask them now. Otherwise, we can move to public testimony.
I do not have any other questions, so we can move to public testimony.
Thank you so much, Chair Juan, and all the council members. I really, truly appreciate you taking the interest in contracts, which I know is not necessarily what everyone thinks is the sexiest part of city government, but honestly, your appreciation for procurement really being the foundation of what represents the city's values and how you implement programs that are important to the constituents of New York. And I really look forward to our continued partnership.
Thank you to members of the administration. The first public panelist will be Nora Moran. Ms. Moran, you will be limited to 2 minutes. You may begin when the sergeants announce the time.
Clock is ready.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Nora Moran. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at United Neighborhood Houses. We're a policy organization working with New York City settlement houses and have 40 members across the city in every borough, doing everything from early childhood education all the way up through senior services. They have a wealth of experience in contracting with the city, a lot of experience, the ups and downs over the past couple of years of that process. And our testimony today is just going to focus on a couple of recommendations for this budget to strengthen that process. First, we'd like to just say overall, we think the A Better Contract for New York report that Mayor Adams and Comptroller Lander put out is a really positive step toward improving the contracting process. It is great to see that they're doing that so early in their tenure. So we look forward to working to make those recommendations a reality. Looking forward, a couple of budget recommendations we'd make. The first is reopening the indirect cost rate initiative. Providers are coming up against their 3-year period for when their previous indirect rates were approved. We've not yet heard from any of the city agencies or MOCs as to what the process will be for reopening that, getting a new round of approved rates, making sure that providers can retain that going forward on future contracts. So the process last time worked pretty well. And so we'd urge MOCs just to get that started so that providers know what their rates are early before we get to the next fiscal year. And our last 3 recommendations really are around pay and support for the human services sector. We're supportive of the Just Pay campaign. 3 things that campaign is calling for. The first is a COLA, a 5.4% COLA on the personnel services line of all human services contracts. The second is a wage floor of $21 an hour for human service workers. And the third is a comprehensive wage and benefit schedule for staff.
Time expired.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Moran. If any council members or the chair have questions, please use the Zoom raise hand function now. Seeing no hands raised, we will now move on to the next panelist. Next up, we will hear from Gloria Kim at the Human Services Council. Ms. Kim, you may begin when the sergeants call time.
Clock is ready.
Sorry, I think my mic was muted. Good afternoon, Chair Wan and members of the City Council Committee on Contracts. My name is Gloria Kim, and I'm the Senior Policy Analyst of the Human Services Council, a membership organization representing over 170 human services providers in New York City. We greatly appreciate the collaboration between Mayor Adams and Comptroller Lander on the joint task force to get nonprofits paid on time. This is a significant achievement and look forward to the city implementing these reforms, which will not only support human services organizations, but also the communities that they serve. We're also happy to see our longtime partner, Lisa Flores, as the Director of MOCs and Chief Procurement Officer. However, it's crucial that MOCs clean up the backlog of contracts as nonprofits struggle with the delays in the procurement process. Last year, we surveyed our members and 70% of organizations reported a delayed payment from the city, and nearly 46% of respondents were forced to take out loans or draw on a line of credit due to withheld or delayed payments, where the average annual cost of interest for those loans was reported as $223,000. Providers have also worked with the city on the indirect cost rate initiative over the past 3 years, and we're generally satisfied with the process. However, it's critical that MOCs reopen the process immediately so that providers can apply for their indirect rates before July 1st. Organizations shouldn't have to scramble to put together resources as they're in the dark on whether they will receive their full indirect rate, putting their operations and programs at risk. It's also important that indirect funding become baselined and move to city agencies as standard agency funding instead of an initiative. Without permanent indirect funding, it prevents providers from spending crucial dollars on supporting the full organization, such as upgrading IT, time spent complying with government requests, and cleaning and maintenance, which are particularly crucial during COVID-19. We're also proud members of the Just Pay campaign, which is a racial equity and gender justice campaign committed to ending the government exploitation of human services workers by demanding contracted staff be paid fair wages for their labor. Years of underfunding have resulted in the sector being some of the lowest compensated workers in the city's economy.
Time expired.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. Again, if any council members have questions, please use the Zoom raise hand function now. Seeing no questions, we will now move on to the next panelist. The next panelist will be Deidre Sully. Deidre Sully, you may begin your testimony as soon as the sergeants call the time.
Clock is ready.
Greetings, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Council Committee on Contracts. Chairwoman Wan, thank you for having me today. My name is Deidre Sully. I'm the Senior Director of Health Policy and Community Affairs at Public Health Solutions. Public Health Solutions is dedicated to improving the health of the public in New York City beyond through service delivery, research, capacity building, and policy analysis. Our mission is to implement innovative, cost-effective population-based and community health programs, conduct research that provides insight on public health issues. Two things that I just wanted to bring up to you today is that our programs serve the public. They serve more specifically vulnerable New Yorkers and families who are in underserved areas. When we experience unpredictability, such as late contracts, which then move forward to late payments, it creates an issue on how we can deliver crucial services, much needed services to our populations and constituent base and our clients. And it also affects how they are able to access care. The other reason is because we also have workers who help to provide these services. So just as those who have testified before me, we are also joining in on the Just Pay campaign to make sure that these contracts also include COLAs and have a living wage for people, because they need the most basic things, which are food, clothing, and shelter. And in order to do that, they have to have the income to be able to reach that. So we are also asking for setting a wage floor, making sure that the salaries are comparable between city and state, as well as instituting a COLA of 5.4%. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sully. If any council members have questions, please use the Zoom raise hand function now. Seeing no questions, we will now move on to the next panelist. April Herms will be the next panelist. Ms. Herms, you may begin when the sergeants announce the time.
Clock is ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Wan and the City Council Contracts Committee. I'm April Herms. I'm the interim co-director of Take Root Justice, which is a nonprofit organization that provides legal services to New York City's low-income communities. I'm here to build on the testimony of my other nonprofit colleagues who've already spoken in strong favor of the report from the Joint Task Force to get nonprofits paid on time. We have also found council discretionary funding to be a double-edged sword because of the immense challenges and delays in the contracting process. Because the council passes the budget in June for the fiscal year that starts on July 1st, discretionary funding contracts are not registered until many months after the start of the fiscal year. And in our experience, it's sometimes up to 9, 12 or more months before the start of the fiscal year. And during this delay, nonprofits are expected to provide services and front the money for doing so until the contracts are registered and we can be reimbursed. And as my colleagues have already mentioned, this places immense financial strain on nonprofits who often need to take out lines of credit that charge interest to float these programs until our contracts are registered and the council can, and we can start invoicing for them. There is a returnable grant fund through which we can get bridge loans, but those funds are irregularly available. The process is complex and it differs depending on city agency. So we strongly urge both the council and MOX to adopt the recommendations from the Joint Task Force around streamlining the contracting process and making funds available to nonprofits upfront who are providing critical services to city communities without having to incur additional costs and additional delays before our contracts are registered. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Herms. If any council members have questions, please use the Zoom raise hand function. Seeing no hands raised, we will now move on to the next and final panelist, Mr. Tawaki Komatsu. You may begin when the sergeants call time.
Clock is ready.
Mr. Komatsu is on
Can you hear
mute.
me?
There.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
So, question for you. Why is New York City doing business with a company that is continuing to commit wage theft against me? That dates back to 2012. Next week, on March 9th, I have an oral arguments hearing against this company called NTT Data. And that company is doing business with HRA, the Department of Education, other agencies. I've previously testified against that company since 2017 to no avail. So the point is, people that are attending today's public hearing, watching it remotely, they're all funding those contracts. So for all the city council members, if you aren't being paid for the work that you're performing, why would you want somebody to have business with the city council if essentially they were preventing you from feeding your family? So also, I tried testifying in a public hearing last week against a company called Urban Pathways. It's the slumlord of the building for which I reside. I was illegally prevented from testifying in that hearing that was conducted remotely. There's a plan for the Department of Aging to give Urban Pathways about 15 million more in funding while it's neglecting repairs. Also, I should point out that HRA and Urban Pathways, they jointly illegally changed my apartment lease agreement 2 days after I signed it in 2016. Also, last point, I have a federal lawsuit against the city of New York. Federal Judge Edgardo Ramos last month authorized me to sue the city council. So yet again, while it's connected to today's public hearing, a member of the city council illegally terminated my video connection without prior notice. So that's a flagrant violation of the First Amendment and 14th Amendment rights. So Ms. Wan, I have nothing against you whatsoever, you're new. Question I have for you is, can you find out who terminated that video connection without apprising me of that? And yeah, the other point too is, in your capacity as the chairwoman for this committee, what can you do to terminate the City of New York's contracts with Urban Pathways and also NTT Data?
Time
I
expired.
talked to Lisa Flores about that previously to no avail. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Komatsu. If any council members have questions, please use the Zoom raise hand function now. Seeing those Zoom hands raised, I will now turn it back to the chair for closing remarks.
Mr. Komatsu, I hope you can reach out to your council member wherever in the city that you reside to have your questions addressed, since it's under their jurisdiction. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And I thank you so much, especially Lisa Flores, the city's Chief Procurement Officer and the Director of the Mayor's Office of Contract Services, as well as her amazing team, and for all of those, all my colleagues for being here, and for our Contracts Committee staff, and for all of the organizations as well as individuals who came to testify. I thank you so much for your attendance, and I officially adjourn this